Well, before that, let's move to this. The Democratic Alliance will reevaluate the CVs of its public representatives. The party has in recent weeks seen some of its leaders resigning after they were found to have incorrect or falsified qualifications. Joining us to make sense of how this process will pan out is Tony Heaney, a Labour analyst. Tony, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. Well, of course, we do understand that these issues regarding the falsification of qualifications don't only just affect the DA. Let's speak about it on a more broader spectrum here. What are the implications of this?
It sounds like you're quite right. So the question of academic fraud is something that many organizations are plagued with from time to time. And we have seen legislation in the last couple of years, which in fact can result, if it's proved, if academic fraud is proved, it can result in a fine or imprisonment. But of course, it can also lead to dismissal from any such organization, be it the DA or any other employer for that matter.
So there's also this view that it is vital that employers, both in the private sector as well as in government, should verify all the information of applicants. Let's speak to the importance of that as well.
Yes, you highlight an important point, Mhlanhla. I think frequently, perhaps all too frequently, employers are not thorough enough when it comes to reference checking, and particularly checking on the legitimacy or validity of academic qualifications. So we do see it in practice, unfortunately, all too often, that it's only after the employee has commenced employment, and sometimes many years later, that it's established that there is some degree of academic fraud, there are fraudulent qualifications, and then of course the employer has to deal with that by following various processes which can lead to ultimately potentially criminal prosecution and of course dismissal.
Right. Now the DA is opting for an audit, but in broader terms, let's just speak about what means does the employer have to assess and find out whether applicants have actually falsified their qualifications.
Well, there are ways of doing that. There are, the National Qualifications Framework Amendment Act has various ways that provides various channels for that to occur. But if I could use a simple example, if I said to you that I have a degree from UCT and this is my qualification and this is the year in which I qualified, nothing stops you from phoning that university and verifying that. And there are also central agencies that can, such as the National Qualifications Framework agencies, that can investigate and give you an answer very quickly.
While it is outright fraud to tender bogus qualifications, are employers entitled to lay charges against the perpetrators with the police?
Well, they can, and of course that's something ultimately that they would have to make a decision on. First and foremost, when it comes to most employers, they would want to if they're faced with fraudulent academic or bogus academic qualifications, the first thing in their mind is going to be is dismissing them, removing them from employment, so that the damage is limited. Because of course that breaks the trust relationship between the parties, between the employer and the employee, if the employee has presented bogus qualifications. But of course it can be taken further in terms of, as I've mentioned, a piece of legislation that was introduced or an amendment to some legislation a couple of years ago, the National Qualifications Framework Amendment, which means, as I say, that if prosecuted successfully, academic fraud can lead to, and has in the past already led to, fines and or imprisonment.
Right. Let's speak about how prevalent the issue of falsification of qualifications actually is. Is there a big problem here?
My sense is that it's bigger than we realize.
Yeah.
Of course, if you don't know, you don't know until it's been revealed. But my sense is, if I look at it anecdotally within our client base, that if an audit were to be conducted in a large employer, the chances are very high that there will be some academic fraud. And it, of course, it would be alarming to the employer. But there are many, many cases of this. And of course, until such time as it becomes apparent, it's unknown. But really, in the current day and age, especially with us having such high unemployment, employers would be well advised to conduct an audit into the verification of the academic qualifications of their staff.
But if those perpetrators are called out, you mentioned a bit of this earlier in our conversation. Could this kind of form a space for them to be dismissed outright?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
And that is, that would be the first step. The first step to get them removed from staff. And then a decision would have to be made about what needs to be done after that. But, you know, we do have fairly robust legislation which can, you know, put people in jail if it's a step. And it has done already. There are cases of this. There was a case not so long ago in the last 2 years where 2 teachers in a teaching capacity were found to have falsified their teaching qualifications and had been teaching for 9 years, and they went to jail. So, you know, there are other examples of that. And I think, you know, unfortunately, job applicants are desperate on the one hand for employment, but they don't realize that this degree of fraud or dishonesty can actually land them in jail and get them into a lot of trouble.
And what are some of the other processes that can be followed? I mean, one thinks about disciplinary hearings here.
Yes, so if an employee is found to, if it appears on the probabilities, so the burden of proof internally when it comes to these issues is on the probabilities. If an employer has enough evidence that an employee has probably fraudulently presented fraudulent qualifications, then a disciplinary hearing would be convened and a verdict would be reached on that. And if they're found guilty, it would certainly fall into the category of gross or severe dismissal, gross or severe misconduct, warranting dismissal.
Well, Tony, thank you very much for that very insightful chat. That was Labour analyst Tony Heaney.